Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant-General Alain Pelletier. I'm the commander of 1 Canadian Air Division in Winnipeg, and I'm here in my capacity as the Operational Airworthiness Authority for the Canadian Armed Forces. Joining me today are Brigadier-General Nancy Tremblay, the Technical Airworthiness Authority, and Colonel John Alexander, the Director of Flight Safety and the Airworthiness Investigative Authority. Flying operation for the CH-148 Cyclone fleet will resume in the coming days, signaling the official lifting of the operational pause, which I ordered as a precaution following the tragic accident involving Stalker 22 on April 29th in the Ionian Sea. Les opérations de vol de la flotte de CH-148 Cyclone reprendront au cours des prochains jours, ce qui indique ainsi la fin de la pause opérationnelle ordonnée de manière préventive à la suite de l'accident tragique de Stalker 22 le 29 avril dernier dans la mer Ionienne. This resumption of flying activity is a result of a detailed analysis and risk assessment based on the known conditions that led to the accident. Conditions that have been validated through the initial investigation work. It includes several mitigation measures aimed at maximizing safety of our crews at all times. I assure you, this decision was not taken lightly. Together, the three of us here represent the validation authority within the Canadian Armed Forces that assesses and ultimately decides whether our military aircraft are fit to fly. We are here to explain how we were able to confidently order the lifting of the operational pause on the Cyclone fleet, while respectfully asking for your patience and understanding as we remain mindful of the ongoing flight safety investigation into the accident. Before we proceed, however, I want to take the opportunity to speak directly to the families and loved ones of the 6 members we lost on April 29. Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra, Master Corporal Matthew Cousin, Captain Kevin Hagan, Captain Brendan McDonald, Captain Maxime Miron-Morin, and Sub-Lieutenant Matthew Pike. We continue to mourn with all of you. We take our duties and responsibilities as they relate to the operation and the fleet we fly very seriously. We, along with our teams, are working hard to understand what happened with the aim of ensuring it does not happen again. Please know that we will always honor their memory and their service to Canada. The resumption of flying for the CH-148 Cyclone fleet allows our maritime helicopter community to return to what they do best and carry on their maritime mission in support of the Royal Canadian Navy. Grâce à la rigueur de l'enquête menée par le colonel Alexander et à l'expertise et la collaboration de son équipe, nous avons pu en apprendre suffisamment sur les conditions ayant mené à l'accident pour nous permettre de mener une analyse des risques rigoureuse. Cette analyse a été réalisée par une équipe d'experts provenant de l'organisation de la directrice générale, gestion du programme d'équipement aérospatial et de mon organisation au sein du quartier général de la 1e Division aérienne du Canada à Winnipeg. À l'aide des données de vol tirées de l'enregistreur de Stalker 22, ils ont été en mesure d'isoler les conditions de l'accident, de les reproduire à l'aide du simulateur du CH-148 et d'élaborer des mesures d'atténuation qui sont mises en œuvre. Dans le cadre de l'ensemble de ce processus, on a pu démontrer, grâce à la mise en œuvre délibérée des mesures d'atténuation, qu'il est sécuritaire pour la flotte de reprendre ses opérations. Maintenant, j'aimerais donner la parole au colonel Alexander, qui parlera davantage de l'enquête et des conditions qui ont mené à l'accident du 29 avril dernier. John?
Merci, monsieur. Et bonjour. À titre d'autorité des enquêtes sur la navigabilité pour les forces armées canadiennes, je suis responsable de mener des enquêtes pour le ministre de la Défense nationale et en son nom, de manière indépendante de la chaîne de commandement. La semaine dernière, nous avons publié L'enquêteur vous informe, qui comprenait une description de l'accident. Mon objectif aujourd'hui est de fournir de l'information contextuelle par rapport à notre compréhension jusqu'à maintenant de ce qui s'est passé, même si notre enquête se poursuit afin de comprendre pourquoi. During the return to land on HMCS Fredericton, the aircraft made a pass on the port side of the ship from stern to bow. The aircraft then executed a left-hand turn to establish a downwind leg in preparation for an approach to the ship. Astern of the ship, the aircraft commenced a final left turn to set up for the approach. During this final, complex maneuvering turn to close with the ship, the aircraft did not respond as the crew would have anticipated. A complex maneuvering turn is one in which two or more inputs are applied through the pilot's controls. In this case, it was the simultaneous application of a pitch, roll, and yaw inputs. This event occurred at a low altitude, was unrecoverable, and the aircraft entered a high-energy descent and impacted the water astern the ship. The beacon airfoil unit, which houses the memory module for the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, along with a global positioning satellite receiver and beacon, was recovered by first responders on the surface of the water. It is designed to depart the aircraft under high gravitational forces or when at submerged depths, and it immediately begins transmitting positional information. Critical memory components of the recovered beacon airfoil unit were dispatched to the National Research Council here in Ottawa approximately 72 hours after the accident. Work began immediately to recover the information and to confirm that it had not been compromised by the salt water, nor had it received internal damage due to the crash. The National Research Council was then able to produce modeling showing us the aircraft's flight path, attitude, some instrument indications, as well as the pilot's inputs into the flight controls. Based on this information, we then proceeded to refly the flight profile of the Cyclone simulator in shearwater, as it was captured by the flight data recorder in the moments leading to the accident. During these trials, we found the simulator responded almost identically to how the NRC's modeling illustrated the incident aircraft. This immediately demonstrated to us that the flight control inputs given by the flying pilot were not producing a corresponding reaction to the pitch attitude of the aircraft. Based on this simulator work and the information presented on the flight data recorder and ongoing investigative work, we have been able to exclude a mechanical failure as a line of inquiry. We then engaged with the original equipment manufacturer, Sikorsky, to validate our findings and to see if they were able to provide collaboration and insight into the evidential aircraft behavior. To understand what happened, one must understand how a fly-by-wire system of the CH-148 Cyclone is designed. The CH-148 flight control system is a redundant, full-authority fly-by-wire flight control system. The cockpit flight controls are not mechanically linked to the main or tail rotor servos. Pilot commands are transmitted through the flight control computers, which also receives information from multiple sources such as aircraft accelerations, rates, attitudes, and airspeed. When the aircraft is flown in the flight director mode, akin to an autopilot, avoidance maneuvers requiring short duration manual flight control inputs in multiple axes were approved during the aircraft certification process. However, it was expected that if the operator's intent was to maneuver the aircraft in multiple axes for more than a short duration, the flight director modes that couple to the pitch and roll axes would be neither desired nor engaged. When a pilot places prolonged inputs into the multiple axes with a flight director set to hold a specific aircraft attitude, we have discovered a bias in the flight director which can result in either the pitch or roll axes offsetting the inputs of the pilot. The effects of the biases varies in magnitude based on the amplitude and duration of the control inputs applied while overriding the pitch and/or roll selection of the flight director. On 29 April, during the crew's complex final maneuvering turn, the aircraft was configured with the automatic flight control system mode engaged and with the flight director selected to a radar altimeter hold and an indicated airspeed hold. This means the aircraft's flight director was set to hold a specific altitude and airspeed. The combination of this configuration, along with the manual inputs from the pilot of pitch, roll, and yaw outside the tested aircraft spectrum, resulted in a pitch bias for which the crew would have had no previous experience nor exposure prior to this event on how to handle the situation. The accident was unavoidable based on their low altitude and consequently the lack of time they had to realize that the aircraft was not responding to their inputs. Now that we understand what has happened, the flight safety investigation will focus on the why. Our focus will be on the analysis of these aircraft systems and the human factors that go behind everything related to identify those preventative measures which will preclude future similar occurrences. The complexity of this investigation will take many months for us to identify and appreciate all the potential active and latent cause factors before we can make our final recommendations in the form of the Flight Safety Investigation Report. Compte tenu de la durée de l'enquête, si notre enquête permet de recueillir des autres renseignements pouvant être diffusés dans l'intérêt de la sécurité de l'aviation, nous n'hésiterons pas à le faire. Toutefois, avant que ce rapport final puisse être rendu public, nous présenterons un résumé de nos résultats aux plus proches parents de nos militaires disparus. And only then will our report be made available to the public. I will now pass the floor to Brigadier-General Nancy Tremblay, the Technical Airworthiness Authority.
Thank you, John. Bon après-midi. À titre d'autorité chargée de la navigabilité technique, je suis responsable, en vertu de la loi sur l'aéronautique, de certains aspects du programme de navigabilité du ministère de la Défense nationale et des Forces armées canadiennes, comme la certification des aéronefs, l'assurance de la navigabilité de la conception, de l'ingénierie et de la maintenance, ainsi que de l'attribution des pouvoirs à ceux qui exécutent ces fonctions. One of my responsibilities as the Technical Airworthiness Authority is to assure the initial airworthiness of all military aeronautical products before they are introduced into service. The Cyclone was no exception to this, and we assured the helicopter underwent a thorough certification process before confirming it met the requirements of the Technical Airworthiness Program and being approved. This process included an assessment of the safety of the design and of the adequacy of in-service support program arrangements. This process also included a rigorous flight test program undertaken by the Royal Canadian Air Force and Sikorsky flight test pilot and flight test engineers. Another of my responsibilities is regarding in-service support of the Cyclone. All those who have a responsibility related to airworthiness within my organization and within industry are duly authorized through an independent assessment by my staff responsible for airworthiness accreditations and audits. This includes these responsible for design, technical, and maintenance work across the entire weapons system support network, in which Sikorsky is an important partner as the manufacturer of the CH-148. As the in-service support arrangements for this new capability continue to evolve, I have been extremely impressed by the collaboration of all the stakeholders within the Department of National Defense, the Canadian Armed Forces, and industry, and I have full confidence in the fleet of the aircraft, in the initial work, and as well in the in-service support arrangements. Suite aux résultats à ce jour de l'enquête entreprise par le directeur de la sécurité des vols, je peux vous confirmer que nous comprenons ce qui s'est passé avec l'hélicoptère le 29 avril 2020 et qui a mené à l'accident. Il n'y a pas eu de défectuosité mécanique de l'aéronef. Pour donner suite au travail exécuté par le lieutenant-général Pelletier et son équipe, je suis convaincu que les mesures mises en place avant de lever la pause opérationnelle ont permis de s'assurer que cet aéronef est sécuritaire et prêt à assumer son rôle. Je suis toujours déterminé, avec mon équipe, à surveiller la navigabilité technique de la flotte du Cyclone avec l'appui de mes partenaires de l'Aviation royale canadienne et de Sikorsky.
Merci, Colonel Alexander et Brigadier-Général Tremblay. Comme vous pouvez le voir à la suite de ce que mes collègues ont dit, le processus de navigabilité est très détaillé et comprend une vaste équipe d'experts. Our own internal examination within the operational and technical airworthiness authorities have already identified the requirements for a series of mitigation measures, which are being implemented now and which will be completed before any aircraft resumes flying operation. These include update to publication, training syllabus, and operational maneuvering that together decrease the risk to an acceptable level to allow for the resumption of flying activities. These mitigation measures will allow the fleet to safely resume flying while not impact the operational effectiveness of the CH-148. I have full confidence in our personnel at 12 Wing Shearwater and in their ability to resume flying activities in a safe manner. Maintenant, il est important de comprendre que l'enquête de la sécurité des vols continue. Lorsque l'enquête sera terminée, un rapport détaillé et complet sera communiqué, ainsi que toutes les recommandations, s'il en est, sur les changements à long terme qui devraient être mis en place. Ce rapport offrira aux Canadiens et aux Canadiennes une compréhension aussi complète que possible de ce qui s'est passé ce 29 avril dernier. Right now, it is our responsibility to ensure we do everything we can to protect the integrity of the investigators' work. As a result, the level of detail we provide today will be the limit of what can be communicated publicly until such time as the investigation has come to a close. Once again, we thank you for your patience while our team of experts works towards as complete an understanding of the accident as possible. Thank you again for being here with us today, and with that, we will now open the floor to questions.
Merci, messieurs. Merci, madame. We will now start with the questions from the floor. Please identify yourself prior to asking your question. Please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. Veuillez vous identifier avant de poser votre question. Veuillez vous limiter à une question et une question de suivi. Merci.
Good afternoon. I can direct this to Colonel Alexander or to General Pelletier. Murray Brewster with CBC News. I just want to clarify that essentially what you've told us is that the investigation is looking at the flight control software and the inputs to the flight control software and how they responded. Can you tell us whether or not the flight control computers performed as you thought they were going to?
I'll let Colonel Alexander address the element of the focus of the investigation. So go ahead, John.
Thank you, sir. Sir, so yes, we are focusing on the flight control computers and how they reacted. We understand this bias now that had not been previously known to us or understood by us, and understanding that it occurs in a very specific regime of flight, in a very specific combination, with the flight director coupled up in an attitude mode and attempting to overfly the inputs of that flight director. We are confident that we have the right mitigation measures to overcome that. And we will continue to focus on the much broader questions of why this occurred.
Just as a follow-up, just for clarification, did the flight control computer freeze, and is there not a manual override to the AFCS?
So the There's no relation between this accident and the previous flight control computer issue. So in this case, it's not an element of the flight control computer, but rather the element of bias that is in the software itself. And that is one of the element of the sequence of events that led for that bias to be introduced. Anything you want to add, John, on this?
I think that's good. But just to clarify, is there a manual override?
There is a capability to manually override that. If you think about the flight control systems of this aircraft as a tiered cake, you have at the base level a primary flight control system, which flies very much in the traditional manner that an aircraft flies in. Then you have an automatic flight control system, which is a higher level of automation intended to reduce the workloads for the pilots. And then finally at the top, you have a flight director mode. There is a selection switch available to the aircrew to degrade to the lower systems at any time. But again, I would come back to, and this is what we need to understand from our investigation, is the reaction time of the crew to be able to react to that scenario, that accident as it unfolded. So we have a great deal of work left to do to understand that.
And as part of the mitigation measures that have been put in place, will be simulator work and ground training so that the aircrew understand, are able to recognize and recover from such an event in the future.
Hi there, Mackenzie Gray with CTV News. From previous reporting and from the last briefing that the CFA had about this, it came to light that the helicopter was involved in a photo shoot near or close to when the incident took place. Are you going to be banning these type of photo shoots for the Cyclone helicopter or any other flights that the CFA takes? And how big a role did the fact that it was involved in a photo shoot play in the crash?
Okay, so at this point, what the investigation has focused are the elements that led directly to the aircraft impacting the water, and which resulted in the fatalities that we've actually discussed. And so now the investigation team will look at the rest of the sequence of the flight in terms of the activities leading to the events in order to actually understand the why. Okay?
Yeah, I think I would follow up with a disassociation of the idea of the photo shoot somehow being a contributory factor here. The photo pass is a very unremarkable straight and level pass beside the ship from bow to stern on the port side. It was followed by a very unremarkable level turn out. And so by that point, the photo pass has been completed and done. We are focused on the last elements of the complex maneuvering turn towards the ship.
Thank you for that. Judging by what you had said earlier, Colonel, the helicopter was close to the ship when it crashed. I'm correct in saying that? So why did the search and rescue take such a long period of time? When we heard the first reports, it seemed like there was a large area where the rescue was taking place, yet it seems from what you've said that it was quite close to the ship. What's the disconnect between those two things?
So based on the recollection of the events outside of just the investigative work that is ongoing right now, the search and rescue work was initiated after the maritime group lost contact with the helicopter, and so it was at that point the crew went back to what I would call the combat station in order to actually find and assess what has happened. And so at that point, the ships that were involved in that NATO maritime group contributed effectively to the recovery, to the search and recovery effort. So there was no delay proper per se in terms of the initiation of the rescue effort that I'm aware of. Then have you uncovered anything else with regard to the transmission of the info at that point, or?
No, I would say the search commenced immediately by the ship's crew. They went to immediate flying stations and commenced their immediate recovery operations. This was a high energy impact. It is not a situation where an aircraft is floating on the surface and can be quickly identified and recover. This was going to be a protracted search. Of course, our priority was obviously right at the start is to look for survivors. And that was the priority over everything else.
Thank you. We will now go to the phone for any questions. Please identify yourself prior to asking your question. Nous allons aller au téléphone pour des questions. Veuillez vous identifier avant de poser votre question. Merci.
Thank you. Merci. For questions, please press star 1. Pour toute question, faites étoile 1. The first question, Lee Berthiaume, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Yes, thank you. I just missed the very top of the news conference here, so I was hoping you might be able to say when this operational pause is lifted. It's immediate, and whether there are going to be any restrictions on the operation of these aircraft as you continue to look at the cause of this issue.
So thanks for the question. The operational pause is being lifted as we speak. Truly, the flying operations will resume only once a certain set of circumstances have taken place or a certain set of conditions, which includes briefing of the crews to understand the limitations that have been uncovered, as well as some ground training with the overall flight control system, followed by simulator sessions that will enable our crews to not only identify, but also recognize, identify the phenomenon, but also learn about the recovery mechanism. So that's what's going to take place in terms of the mitigation measures. As I mentioned, mitigation measures include documentation, change in the training syllabus, and then the last part will be some restrictions in the operational maneuvers, which are very narrow, focus on that narrow element that we've been able to isolate through the fine work of the investigative authority in collaboration with the OEM, the Sikorsky. And so we're going to focus on isolating that element, which is not going to affect the operational capability of the aircraft.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up, we've had now 3 incidents that we know of, anyways, involving the cyclones. We got the triple reset in 2017. We have the hard landing in 2019, and now we have this tragedy that has unfolded. How can you reassure not only the air crews but their families that basically all the issues have been identified and are going to be addressed with this? That there aren't going to be more issues coming up?
Well, I can tell you that I've got full confidence, as I mentioned earlier, into our airworthiness system and authorities as well, by the team that you've got here representing the overall airworthiness authorities. And through the work that has been done, not only through the certification of the aircraft, but also the ongoing work in relation to this accident. And as we continue to introduce the aircraft into service, just as a reminder, this aircraft achieved the initial operating capability in 2018 and is set to achieve final operating capability in 2024. All of that transition work is done in collaborations with the Technical Airworthiness Authority and the Operational Airworthiness Authority and the aircraft manufacturer. So we take deliberate steps in ensuring that the aircraft is safe to fly and that the air crews are properly trained. And so based on that level of confidence, I'm fully confident into the resumption of activity.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, Andrea Gunn, the Chronicle Herald. Line open.
Hi there. My question is just for whoever wants to answer. So I'm not obviously a technical expert in this stuff, but I'm not really following how you guys can be so sure that there is not a continued problem with the cyclones, knowing that there's this kind of software glitch that exists in the system. And how do you know that there's not other glitches that may not have been uncovered yet?
Thanks. So as I mentioned, we've got a very good collaboration between the different airworthiness authorities and with the aircraft manufacturer. Following the accident and the rigorous work that has been ongoing for the last 6 weeks by the investigative authority, we were able to actually isolate the issue, to replicate the issue in the simulator with the exact same parameters and the exact same outcome. that those findings are also corroborated by the company. And the company actually went further in looking at other potential scenarios that could lead to such a event as the bias that has been talked about by Colonel Alexander. So based on the work that has taken place and the coordination between the technical airworthiness and the operational airworthiness, that's why we are so confident. Nancy, anything that you want to highlight?
What I would like to highlight is the fact that the information that we received from the investigation so far indicates that the accident that happened on the 29th of April is absolutely unrelated to any previous issues that you would have heard concerning the Cyclone fleet. Based on the investigation that the information we received from the Director of Flight Safety, we engaged Sikorsky right away, which, by the way, have been collaborating very well so far with us. And we've asked them to confirm that there were no other biases than the one that has been described by Colonel Alexander as a result of the accident. This has already been confirmed, and at this point in time, it is too early to say that there is an issue with the flight control system. As the investigation continues to progress, the Director of Flight Safety will provide both the Operational Airworthiness Authority and me and my staff as the Technical Airworthiness Authority with relevant information that is necessary to ensure the safe operation of that fleet, and longer-term measure, if required, will be implemented then.
And I just want to finish by saying that, again, as a reminder, this accident is a result of a sequence of events that led to that bias that was observed. And so right now we've isolated the issues, and we've put mitigation measures around, and in order to actually be able to actually continue safe operations with the aircraft itself.
I guess my follow-up to that, thank you for your response, but I guess my follow-up to that would be, and I'm sorry if this is redundant, but you're saying that this is not related to any previous known issues with the aircraft. These aircrafts are relatively new, so you only found out that this could happen when 6 people died, and I'm just kind of not sure how there is any certainty that there aren't other things that could just happen and result in the death of more people. I'm just not following how you can be sure that these aircraft are safe if just such a there's just this one, sequence of events that led to the death of 6 individuals.
Yeah, noted. And as I mentioned, the element that we've been able to isolate and replicate in the simulator, which was a very good indication, which was again also confirmed by the company, gives us that level of confidence. I would also like to remind people that in the flying operation, there are always risk involved in flying activities. So the flying operation is not an activity that is without risk. However, our role is to manage that risk, mitigate the risk, so that we're able to actually continue safely to operate the aircraft and along with the qualified crew. Anything else that you want to add?
No, sir, that's good.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from David Pugliese, Ottawa citizen. Line open.
Thank you. Could someone tell me, or does someone know how close the helicopter was to the ship when it crashed?
John?
Thank you, sir, for the question. We don't yet have the specific data on that. The flight data recorder has allowed us to pinpoint to within 4 square feet of exactly where the aircraft entered the water. The data I have yet to unpack and look at is the ship's data of the ship's GPS positioning to make that assessment. My expectation is that will be something that comes out, but we do know that it was within line of sight, as there were witnesses on the back of the ship who saw the helicopter crash.
Sorry, follow-on question. Is there a kind of a rough estimate that you could provide us with? I know that the specific, distance isn't available until you crunch all the data, but is there kind of a rough estimate?
I would be hesitant to give you a number, only to say that we know it was within eyesight of a couple of witnesses that we have since interviewed as part of our investigation.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from a participant. Participant from Frontline Defense Magazine, Canada. Please state your name and proceed with your question. Your line is open.
Good afternoon. It's Ken Pohl in Ottawa. Have the data from the flight data recorder? Sorry, let me rephrase that. Are you able to say what altitude the aircraft was at when this series of events took place, and also the sea state at the time? And the final question is, do you have any idea how much simulator time will be required to get the air crews up to speed, so to speak? Thank you.
So I'll let Colonel Alexander talk about the details, and then I'll talk about mitigation measures, John.
So as for altitude, we do know they were in the low-level environment as they were setting up to return to the ship. It was a complex maneuver, so they were exchanging airspeed for altitude. So there was an initial climb up, and then it's through the descent phases they're coming back, turning towards the ship that we see the incident occur that causes the aircraft to hit the water. The sea state is reported as relatively calm at the time. And I will defer back to you, sir, for the simulator.
Good. So our focus right now at the 1 Canadian Air Division is obviously to actually bring back the maritime helicopter community back into flying operation. As I mentioned, this is going to be done through a deliberate ground training program that will be accompanied by obviously modifications or publication to properly capture the element related to this accident, and then followed by rigorous sim training. We anticipate that the simulation training that is specifically associated with the training of the air crew in the identifications and the recovery procedure associated with this event will be one sortie. So one sim training event. I cannot tell you if it's going to be the duration of that sim training event, but it's a one sim training event. And then after that, we're going to be focused on resuming flying activity because the fleet has been into a very low operational settings since the 13th of March when we entered the business continuity plan due to COVID. And since the 29th of April, the fleet has been put on op pause. So we're going to use the simulator as well as the aircraft in order to actually resume those flying activities. And then our next step will be focused on the fourth generation of crews that will be required to be embarked in support of the Royal Canadian Navy for whatever mission they are called upon in support of our different commitments, either from the East or the West Coast.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press star 1 on the telephone keypad if you have a question. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à faire étoile 1 pour toute question. The next question is from Jesse Thomas from Global News. Line is open.
Thank you. We understand this was complex maneuvering, but I guess I'm just trying to understand, was it a case of software issue or human factor, or was it a kind of a case of both? Colonel Alexander, you said this accident was unavoidable. I guess what made it unavoidable?
So, as was said, it's a aggregation of events or a sequence of events that resulted into the accident, unfortunately. In the flight safety environment, we like to refer to the Swiss cheese analogy, where you line up each of the hole and which requires specific events to happen in order to actually lead to the accident. And so in this case, a series of events or elements contributed to this accident, both, we believe, into the human factors as much as the material. John, do you want to expand on the second part of the question?
Yeah, so I would go in with the point on human factors. Human factors is a very detailed analysis. When you involve the human in any sort of chain of events, whether it's the very initial stages from design to implementation, construction of the vehicle, training, and aircrew environment of how they understand the world around them, all of that speaks to human factors. And so we need to understand from start to finish how the human factors element came into this. We know there's a bias in the system. We need to understand that bias as from a design perspective forward of how that works in the system. So I wouldn't. I would be remiss to suggest that it is a computer fault at this stage. We need to understand what the computer was intending to do before we can make that sort of assessment, and what the human element to that design and construction involved.
Thanks.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to that. When you talk about the mitigation measures, how does it relate to the bias? I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what the bias was.
So through the publication, first of all, we will capture the element of the bias, because to us, this was an unknown element of the flight envelope. So it's going to be captured through the documentation changes. It's going to get captured through the training syllabus in order to actually make our aircrew more aware of the overall flight control system and that specific narrow band of that flight envelope. And then the training aspect through the simulator, once again, identify what conditions may lead to the bias, how to identify or recognize the onset of the bias, because it could be gradual from the way I understand based on my discussion with the investigative authority, and then to take appropriate action to recover through the disengagement of the switch that has been talked about, and follow-on recover maneuver. So that's the approach that we're taking. So it's awareness, but also appropriate simulator training in order to actually build that mental awareness and mental memory for that immediate action that could be required.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Lee Berthiaume, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Yes, sorry, I realize this may be just beating a dead horse. I just want to completely understand, are we saying it's a software glitch or not?
So it's a sequence of events, which is a mix of human factors and the bias, which is, I believe, the logic inside the actual software of the aircraft at this point. John, anything?
Yeah, so software always carries with it in a flight fly-by-wire system a set of flight control laws. The flight control laws looks at all the data that comes into it, and then it takes the pilot's inputs and relates that to a input back to the control surfaces to carry out those orders. So again, the term of a software glitch is a bit it's a challenging statement to use because we need to understand the design specifications of what we were wanting those flight control laws to do and how they were to be applied. In this context of this accident, we understand in a very specific regime with the flight director coupled up in an attitude mode, prolonged inputs of the flight controls in the 3 axes allows an accumulation of this bias over time. So the mitigating factors that we understand is with any aircraft that's designed for combat, you could very easily foresee yourself in a situation where you have to take manual control, whether it's to evade a threat or otherwise. The aircraft will allow you to do that, and it's designed to allow you to do that, but it also would require now the quick follow-up to degrade that autopilot system and take the flight director offline as quickly as possible. So that's what our mitigation training will allow the crews to recognize and immediately instinctively react to.
Just so that I'm trying to make sure I understand. So what you're saying is that the expectation was the autopilot or the flight director would have disengaged, but that it didn't, and instead it led to what we're calling the bias here. It started compensating in ways that were not expected, and that led to the problem that we're seeing, the crash.
I would say that the software is designed in such a way, and now what we're looking at is the operating environment that may require that element or that segment of the flight envelope to be used. So, and that's what we're going to lean on over the next few months with the team here, because once again, in this specific instance, a series of events led to the aircrew finding themselves in that very narrow band, which resulted into the aircraft computer going through their logic based on the pilot inputs, and that being in competition with the inputs that the pilot was trying to actually induce in order to set the recovery. So that element of conflict resulted because of the flight control inputs, because of the aircraft, the multi-axis control inputs by the aircrew. And in this case, we're going to look at, because this is the first instance that we are aware where this occurrence happened. So we're going to assess at this point what are the likelihood of this flight envelope flight envelope being required in the future, and what additional mitigation measures may be or may not be required. But at this point, given the fact that we've been able to isolate that flight envelope, we've been able to actually put a box in order to enable the safe resumption of flying activity. We're confident, and with the simulation training that we're going to provide to the aircrew, which is going to enable them to actually learn about the switch that will disable one level of that automation layer, which will allow them to actually set a recovery path. We're confident that we're going to be able to actually resume safely flying activities.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, David Pugliese, Ottawa Citizen, line open.
Great, thank you. I was wondering if you could qualify, when do you think that flying will start again? Just a rough estimate. Are we talking, do you think, weeks or what?
Okay, so the mitigation measures required the ground training that is being initiated today, and both in Shearwater and Pat Bay with the two operational squadron and the training squadrons, which will be followed by a simulator we expect in the next few days. So depending on the onset of the activities and the availability of the instructors and the schedule, we anticipate that the aircraft could be flying as early as towards the end of the week. However, there's no pressure. It's an element that I've delegated to the wing commander at 12 Wing for him to assess the rate at which the training needs to take place before the actual flying activities starts officially.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further
Operator,
questions
we'll just
registered
take
at this
a
time.
question from the floor and come back to you.
Is that Murray Brewster again with CBC? Just to be perfectly clear, the computer was in control of the aircraft when it went into the ocean.
I would be sort of careful even in that language, because it is a full fly-by-wire system. So inputs are always going in through a computer out to the control surfaces. The biasing that had set up and had built up over time meant that as the pilot was applying a pitch command, essentially requesting the nose to pull up, it was not getting an appropriate response of that to the flight surfaces.
So the computer was in control. The pilot tried to pull up, but he couldn't. Layman's terms. Am I correct?
The pitch bias had allowed the pilot's inputs to be over commanded or overtaken by other data. So in that term, the pitch channel was no longer responding to the pilot.
And do you have any concerns about fly-by-wire? For helicopters, this is a reasonably new technology.
So obviously, we say new technology based on the work that has taken place through the certification process, in which Canadian RCF test pilot and the company Sikorsky's test pilot and flight engineers were involved. We're fully confident into the technology that has been brought to bear here. As I mentioned, sequence of event resulted into that bias being introduced here, which we have discovered, which we have isolated, and for which we have put mitigation measures. But that doesn't take away the capability that fly-by-wire brings in terms of easing the pilot workload throughout the operational envelope of the aircraft. Nancy, as the Technical Airworthiness Authority, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'd like to explain is that the flight control system certification of the Cyclone helicopter was a very rigorous process. The aircraft was certified using the Federal Aviation Regulations for 29, in fact, the airworthiness standards for transport category aircraft. But over and above that, as the Cyclone helicopter had a fly-by-wire system and was a specific aircraft designed for the military used by the Canadian Armed Forces, after extensive consultation with the Federal Aviation Administration, Transport Canada, and the National Research Council in Canada, we've as well imposed additional conditions towards which we looked at the certification of that system. We need to understand that the fly-by-wire system that we have on the aircraft offers handling qualities that make the Cyclone safer to operate in a maritime environment and for landing on and operating from our Canadian frigates. That's all I've got.
Merci, Madame. Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for 2 more questions. Mesdames et messieurs, nous avons le temps pour 2 dernières questions. Operator, back to you for the questions from the phone.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press star 1. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à faire étoile 1. No further questions from the telephone lines. Back to you. Il n'y a plus de questions, au téléphone.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's announcement. Thank you for attending. Mesdames et messieurs, ceci conclut cette annonce. Merci d'avoir assisté à notre événement. Bonne journée.